And just so you guys know, I'm not wearing a shirt. I'm wearing a tank top. I just realized you guys
I
can't get
was
that joke.
wondering that, Dom. I was wondering that.
No, I'm not muffin topping over my desk, if that's what you're asking.
I am.
Well, I'm proud of you. All right.
I'm not. I'm fat.
All right, and with that, welcome to the Moorpark Reporter Sportcast. Today, I am talking to you, but I will not be talking to you for long because I'm going to throw it to our sports desk editor, Danny Stepanovich, because we have a real guest here, so we need a real host. All right, so Danny, why don't you take it from here?
All right, so we got Joe Curley, a 20-year writer for the VC Star in USA Today. Joe, we appreciate you having you on our season 2 premiere, our first ever guest. Covered 11 Rose Bowls, 4 BCS titles, a World Cup. Where does this rank as far as your accomplishments? First guest on the Moorpark Sportscast.
I'm honored. As somebody who, as you could see in that bio, loves covering Moorpark College and Oxnard College and Ventura College stuff as much as covering. Playoffs and the World Cup and NCAA tournaments and all the various stuff we've done with the Star and Scripps Howard News Service and USA Today. It's I remember when I was your age, in your shoes, wanting to get into this industry and loving sports and loving producing content, whether it was writing or obviously what you guys are doing here. And the best, like I said, when I talked to you guys in the class, the best thing that you can do to try to hone your skills is to do it. And so, kudos to you guys for knocking this out and, producing some good journalism. Let's get to it. Let's talk some football.
A fellow JUCO product.
That's right.
College, right?
That's right. Well, Pomona's not a JUCO, but when I was at Pomona, I covered one of my first things I ever covered, when I first ever professional. Did I get paid? Yeah, it's probably my first professional journalism gig, was covering Chaffey College football. I wrote a feature on a Chaffey College quarterback because Chaffey's right there next to Claremont. So yeah, it's it goes. I go back in community colleges a lot longer than you guys do.
All right. Covered the Rams for a few seasons. So we got a lot to talk about. They just came off their win with John Wooford, but the big story is what are the Rams going to do with Jared Goff? I mean, he came into this and he started his career off with Jeff Fisher. So McVay didn't draft him. McVay comes in and they go to the Super Bowl. Once Belichick figures out Goff and McVay, they don't make the playoffs last season. And then this season, it feels like Jared Goff has just taken another step back. We've seen McVay go super conservative with Goff. They've had some ugly losses. And what's your whole take on Goff? What's his future going to be in LA? Because, they traded their first round pick, so they can't draft a quarterback. What's your whole take on Jared Goff?
Well, it's kind of it's fascinating coming, this conversation would have been probably different on Friday than it is. We're now, this is Monday after week 17, ahead of the very first super wild card weekend, right? Where, having 2 triple headers in NFL playoff, a Saturday and a Sunday, is going to be historic. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're all going to spend this week in front of the TV experiencing playoffs in a whole new way. And part of that's going to be Saturday afternoon with the Rams and the Seahawks. The Rams have had a lot of success up there. Getting to Goff, it's funny how I think a lot of what I'll tell you right now is very similar to what I said Friday, even though a lot has changed with Wolford leading them to a victory, getting them in the playoffs. A guy who's an undrafted free agent out of the AAF, which I watched, which I enjoyed because we had a lot of local kids. In fact, a couple locals I think were his teammates. Wolford actually played at Georgia Tech with a kid who was a Star Oaks Christian who's now plays for the Giants. Jared Goff is somebody who the Rams committed to 5 years ago and have never wavered on their commitment to. whether it was trading what was then the highest trade up to the number one overall pick, with an unbelievable, package of picks. It's been doing what it took to hire the young up and coming offensive coach in Sean McVay. It's been giving him one of the biggest contracts in the history of the NFL. It's been having Sean McVay be in a position to draft and develop young quarterbacks that you could at least use to trade pieces, but not doing it because you're so committed to Jared Goff. The Rams in these 5 years have completely and utterly committed to Jared Goff. And, I think there's a lot of debate on whether it was Jeff Fisher that made the call. I think a lot of people would argue that it goes above the head coach, that it maybe even goes ahead of Les Snead. Might be the team president that made those moves. Because remember, you go back to that pick, right? It's so funny. I love to go back and forth, not back and forth with Rams fans, but every week you look at what happened. What's happened with Carson Wentz, where the Goff and Wentz go 1-2. At the time, a lot of Rams fans wanted Wentz. Wentz was kind of consensus one, and the Rams kind of picked Goff when conventional wisdom thought maybe Wentz was the better quarterback. And then a couple weeks ago, when Wentz gets benched, everyone comes out and says, "Oh, this ends the Goff-Wentz debate forever." And it's like just a couple weeks later, now we're having the same conversation with Jared Goff.
I remember to cut you off. I remember Jeff Fisher. I remember when he didn't start Goff right away, and I remember he called out Goff after he got fired. So you're right, maybe it wasn't him that picked him.
Well, they never made it. They put up a unified front and said all three of them made the decision together. But so you never, unless somebody writes a book or has you never really. There's been some reporting done since that, maybe it was above Fisher, but Fisher said publicly that it was his pick and he wanted him. So I mean, I don't think it's really well documented, who actually made that call. I don't think it would have been Fisher. You get a one, it ultimately you make a number one overall pick. You're talking about the GM and the team president going to ownership and saying, this is our idea, and the ownership rubber stamping that. So everyone kind of has their fingerprints on it. It's the same thing with if you're going to give a guy $30 million a year, going to give him that contract, the GM the coach says, okay, the GM makes the call and ownership rubber stamps it. At any point, it's like, it's like when Bill Belichick tried to trade Tom Brady and said they traded Jimmy Garoppolo. It's because ownership said, no, you're not trading Tom Brady. So a lot of this is that the people who really called, the people ultimately responsible is ownership. So it's Kroenke, it's Kevin Demoff. But anyway, I mean, they have not in any way wavered in their 100% commitment to Jared Goff, whether it was the Super Bowl year where you had Rams fans calling him a top 5 quarterback, whether it was last year where people were disappointed and really a lot of that was because of the offensive line, or whether it's this year where the issue this year has been, I think the offense has been okay. It's really been their inability to score in the red zone. And you look at last week, I was joking, everybody is loving John Wolford right now, talking about how he won this game. But to me, his performance and what you got of the offense was probably very similar to what you would have gotten out of a Goff-led offense. So, and that to me, I don't think it's Jared Goff to me is not the issue, because I think Jared Goff is a symptom of how he plays, how the rest of the, whether it's the game plan or the matchups or in order for Goff to perform, the offensive line needs to protect them. There needs to be weapons. He's kind of like a point guard where, he's distributing the ball. He's not, and he's in a division where you've got Russell Wilson, you've got Murray and even Garoppolo to a lesser extent, guys who, aren't kind of the, who aren't on top of this foundation. Russell Wilson was running around making plays when they paid him and they couldn't pay an offensive line. And, he was covering up for all kinds of issues with that offense for years. But that's not, Goff is a traditional quarterback. That's not going to make plays with his legs. You're going to have to protect, and, he's going to distribute the ball. So I don't think so what I'm trying to say is I don't think he's not really the number one issue, but he's also not somebody, in the other hand, he's not somebody that you really should be paying $30 million to.
Okay. Do you think they can win with him in the future? Do you think they can get back to the Super Bowl? We'll see if Andrew Whitworth comes back. I'm sure that's a big piece to why he's struggling.
A month ago I went on, was it Sirius? It was like Mad Dog Radio or something, and said this team should win out and make a serious run for the playoffs. And since then, they've lost to the winless Jets, given away that game against Seattle up there, and now are mired in this really weird, fascinating quarterback controversy where, I think if Goff can play, they're going to play him. I think people will be listening to this maybe by the time these decisions are already made. But, if Goff is healthy, they're going to play him. And it's really ironic that, a lot of Rams fans are excited about this little, adding a little mobile underdog quarterback here in Wolford. Because I think backup court, because they've been so committed to Goff in money, in draft picks, in getting him weapons, that backup quarterback has been one of the biggest holes on this roster because, he had kind of a washed up Blake Bortles that did not look anywhere near anything he had done in Jacksonville when he was a Ram. And that was, then they didn't want to spend the money to even retain Blake Bortles. So they bring in this guy off the street from the AAF, a league that had been discontinued without even finishing its first year. So, I think it's fascinating that, they're so committed to him, they're going to have to stick with him. It's going to be at least another year. Now, if he can't go, he can't go. And then you're talking about throwing Wolford into a playoff game. So, I liked what he did with his legs. But again, same situation. They don't score in the red zone. They only scored 18 points. They only win because Troy Hill, St. Bonaventure High, lives in, family in Oxnard, has the pick six. So, they're going to have to it's going to be old school leaning on this defense. And are you going to be able to lean on this defense against Seattle? And then, who would it be?
New Orleans or Chicago, whoever wins that game.
Yeah, the winner of the New Orleans Green Bay game. So, they're in a spot. And this is a team that has the talent to do it. But it's really weird that they've invested so much offensively. They're an offense, led by an offensive coach, and all their issues right now are on the offensive side of the ball. The defense has been able to basically be the number one defense in football with a new coordinator running a new system with no OTAs in a pandemic. Like what they've done on the defensive side of the ball has been one of the biggest stories, one of the most undersold stories in the NFL this year. With Brandon Staley, what he's done after they get rid of Wade, Coach Phillips, who they were, I thought, a good defense last year. The Rams would have made the playoffs in the current system. They would have been the 7 to play the 2, and they would have been a worthy playoff team last year. I thought they were a pretty good team last year. One of the more underrated defenses in football. They just kind of got embarrassed by the Ravens in a couple spots, and it caused McVay to move on. They bring in a Vic Fangio, born and bred defensive coordinator, kind of in that kind of the amorphous, strategic defense that Vic Fangio brought to life in Chicago and now is in Denver. So that's what they've kind of changed on the fly without any help of having OTAs, which is really in the NFL is an impressive feat. So, it's. We'll see. And to play a team, you have the other layer in terms of Seattle. You're playing a team that you've already played twice, a team that, there's no secrets between these two coaching staffs. The Rams have been good against Seattle recently. I think they kind of made mistakes that caused them to lose that game.
Yeah. I think McVay's like 5-3 against Pete Carroll. if they score at that 1 yard line, I think that's a different story. I know Mitchell and we picked mid-season or 3/4 of the way through the season before the Jets and Seahawks. I think we picked the Rams to win it all, and we saw what you were seeing too. We love how they have these undrafted guys and 6th-round picks stepping up on the defense.
I want to state, Joe, that I've been trashing on the Rams all season, and I rightfully think they're going to be knocked out in this first wild card round.
Well, I mean, I think there's a good argument. That's the problem with this Rams team. If you look at the schedule, right, they win 2 games and play well, and then they shoot themselves in the foot and, are awful. And they give, whether they turn the ball over or can't execute in the red zone. If you look at just what they've done, it's like win 2, lose 1, win 2, lose. There's just no momentum. It's herky jerky. It's, just when you think they've got it figured out, they kind of, fall apart. And, this is a team that I'm trying to think of their best win.
Maybe Tampa Bay.
This is a team that, Tampa Bay can that's everybody's dark horse NFC pick, right? The team that's beaten Tampa Bay and lost to the winless Jets. So, this is why we watch this weekend. This is why we're going to spend the entire weekend in front of the TV because, we don't know.
Do you think they have a better shot with John Wolford or Jared Goff with 3 screws in his thumb?
I think if Goff is healthy, they're going to play him, and they have to play him simply because, it's somebody who's,
Would you give him a good shot at winning this? If Goff?
Sure. I mean, they've beaten Seattle, with Goff. Certainly, Goff made the mistakes that caused him to lose the last time in Seattle. But I thought he was okay after he hurt his. After he hurt his thumb, I thought he looked okay. I didn't think he played particularly worse. So I don't think the thumb's going to be that big of an issue. I think he's going to play and going to go. And now the great thing about this, right, is you have a guy now behind him that's had a little bit of success. Now, for the first time in his career, you've got somebody that you could say, Jared, you're not playing well, sit down. And that changes things. I mean, when Tom Brady had his 2 or 3 worst years as a Patriot quarterback, and they went out and they drafted Garoppolo in the 2nd round, and he had 3 of his best years. He was an MVP after that. I don't care who you are, whether you're Tom Brady.
You saw this with Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love. Yeah.
Just look at that. Look at this. They drafted Jordan Love, and he's going to win the MVP. So, I mean, I don't care who you are. You have to have some competition. There has to be a little bit of feet to the fire. If you're too comfortable, you're not going to be as good as you are, with a little bit of a push. And I think that's, all in all, it'll be good for Goff to have somebody like Wolford behind him that say, hey, he can needs to change a pace. He can run a little bit. If the line's not playing well enough and we can't protect Goff, put in Wolford, he'll run around, and they'll have to change their defense. So I think all in all, that's the best thing to come out of last weekend is that, Wolford was able to respond to that early pick, get to his legs a little bit and win the game. So we'll see, but that's, there's the opinion on Jared Goff. I think he's a symptom of the rest of the things that are happening with that team, and he's not worth the money. That's what the real criticism there is that they should have done something else with that money. Sign him for either less or, I would argue it would be a better situation to find a cheaper quarterback and put more of that money into other parts of the team.
I'm curious, in 5 years, do you think Goff is going to be a Ram? Do you see him playing somewhere else? Do you see him backing up another team?
Well, like I said, there's been no signs whatsoever that they're nothing but 100% committed to this guy. So in that situation, that you can't, things can go south, but there's no reason for anybody to speculate that they're not going to, continue to pay him, continue to commit to him because, he had a poor year. When he dipped last year, they didn't go and draft a quarterback. When he had the poor year before the Super Bowl year, they stayed committed to him. So for some reason, and we could speculate on why that is, for some reason, they've been 100% committed to this guy through the ups and downs, no matter what's happened. And, barring him getting benched this weekend and Wolford, coming off the bench and leading them to a playoff victory, I think that's the only thing that could really happen to shake him loose, at least with another year. I think there's now an out after the contract next year. He's going to be the starting quarterback at least another year, no matter what happens.
Joe, I've got a question. Sorry. We go back to what you say that McVay likes to be the play caller. And McVay's been on record saying that he's trying to always put his players in the best powerful positions for them to succeed. Do you think that he's put Goff in those positions? Or, like you said, it's a combination of a lot of different things. Maybe a change up at the play calling could unlock the potential for this Rams team?
It's fun. I thought about that because I was thinking about what I was going to say to you guys. And it's like, well, if it's not Goff's fault, whose fault is it? And last year, the fault laid on the offensive line. They went real young. They spent some picks and, were transitioning away from that great offensive line that was the kind of the anchor of the Super Bowl team. And they had a rough year, and the line has played better this year. Until Whitworth went down, I think maybe they've dropped off a little bit since Whitworth went down. But there's really, their issues in the red zone date back to the whole time McVay has been there. There was some, when they had Todd Gurley, when he was healthy and he was Todd Gurley, he kind of papered over some of those cracks. He was the option in the red zone that really, kind of made them effective. But a lot of my criticism when I was covering the team on a day-to-day basis was, the guy's done an incredible job. The one weakness has been, the red zone. And so I think, the offense has had a lot of success between the 20s. Certainly when things shorten up, whether it's the system itself or the system combined with the pieces they have, they don't have a real. Josh Reynolds, was drafted to maybe be kind of a red zone threat that somebody could throw the ball up and get it. They don't really have a tight end that could be that in the. The pieces are really effective. They stretch the field and they, vertically and horizontally. They use motion and misdirection and all kind. But when things tighten up, and you're trying to gain, and all 22 guys are within 30 yards of each other, and you're trying to gain those last 10 yards, a lot of that stuff gets, taken away. That space gets taken away. And I think they've just, and I guess you have to go, and it has to be the criticism of McVay. That's probably McVay's weakness, is them in the red zone. And they haven't found, especially since, they lost Todd Gurley being the offensive player of the year, since he, was not at his peak Todd Gurley. They haven't really had an option. And I've said that they need to go out and get a veteran tight end to add to, maybe the blocking scheme. They haven't done that. Or maybe there's some sort of receiver that that they could go get. But, right now that's their weakness is inside the 20.
Joe, so you said you covered the Rams day to day, and you also mentioned Goff's motivation. I go back to beginning of the season when I remember a reporter asked Jared Goff about Alex Smith and what he thought about Alex Smith coming back. And Goff says, he already made a bunch of money. I'm surprised he's coming back. And, it just doesn't sound like you want your franchise quarterback to be saying something like that. Oh, he already made his money. Goff is kind of a low-key Hollywood guy. What was your take from covering him day to day? Did he seem like, was he there after practice throwing balls?
Yeah, he's a committed athlete who did what it took to be successful. I think, you got to respect the guy breaks his thumb on an opposing helmet and pops the thing back in place and keeps playing. That's kind of like old school football, the thing, the stuff that your grandfather tells you about, Staubach or Stabler or whoever, that's some pretty classic football stuff right there. But certainly he's quintessential California, and he's totally laid back and and I think that's part of the reason why the guy went into the Superdome and won maybe in the hardest play, won the NFC Championship game in the hardest place to do it. Even though I'll have to go and look at the quote about Smith, but I think everyone was surprised that Smith made that decision. The guy had 30 some odd surgeries.
Yeah.
And it was, almost lost his leg. And I think a lot of us were thinking that, why I had the same conversation with my wife recently, actually telling her when he came in and played in the game, I'm like, here, look, you got to watch Alex Smith. This is the comeback story in the NFL this year. But Jared does have, some qualities about him that you could criticize. But, on the whole, like I said, he is who he is. If you give him time, he's got tremendous arm talent. He's so laid back almost that he doesn't feel the pressure. You don't really feel like he's choking when he makes a mistake. He's, I made a dumb mistake. It's not like, the pressure was too much for me. This is a guy who took an absolute beating. It was probably the reason they liked him so much. Took an absolute beating at Cal and kept coming back. And, led them to a bowl win his senior year and helped turn that thing around. But I'm not going to bury Goff for kind of having an opinion that I think a lot of us had. But
this isn't a Rams question, but since you talked about Alex Smith, do you think him coming back, even if he played one game and lost, do you think he would have he should have won Comeback Player of the Year, or do you think it should be Big Ben? Who do you think should win that award?
Yeah, the moment, I think a lot of people said the moment he took the field, he won the award. I think if you go back, scroll all the way up in your Twitter feed, when the moment that happened, that was what people were saying. And people who have votes for NFL Comeback Player of the Year, I'm sure he won it the moment he took the field. But, he has played well, and they've made the playoffs. And, say what you want about the NFC East, but they were the best team in the NFC East, and they earned the berth, and now he gets to go up. I was looking forward to seeing if Brady going up against the Giants with the history there, if Philly would have won last night. But certainly Washington, with their defensive front, one of the best defensive lines in the game, I think that's going to be a closer game than a lot of people realize. I was pretty critical of expanding the playoffs when it happened. I thought, you looked to previous years and that 17 maybe wasn't a worthy playoff team. But I think last year with the Rams and this year with these teams, the Bears, are kind of a borderline team. But, I think all these matchups are good matchups, and I think the extra game is going to be worth it. Now, I don't like the innovation they're talking about adding a 17th game, which I'm really against, because it throws the whole schedule out of whack. You're going to have a bunch of teams now playing, one more home, or every team's going to play, have an unbalanced schedule. So I think that's going to throw everything out of whack. I was really against it when the Premier League was talking about doing that in soccer, and I think it's terrible. I think that they're going to hammer it through because they're going to say that's how they're going to make up for the money that they've lost with the pandemic. But, I think this innovation was correct. Adding the team in each conference, I think, is going to work. But I'm not going to like it next year if we have a 17-game season.
Yeah, totally. And just going back to that Seahawks-Rams game, if you're the Rams and Rams fans, I feel like this is the matchup you would want the most out of all of these games, because it's a division rival, and this is the team out of all the teams in the playoffs right now, the best. So do you think the same way, or do you think that Rams should be scared of this team?
I think if you're the underdog, if you're the team that's won both games, I think if the regular, you never want to be the team that's beaten a team twice and then has to play them again in the playoffs, because you feel like you've already earned. I think I wish there was a way to keep divisional games away. It happens all the time, but I wish there was a way to keep divisional matchups from happening in the wild card round. I'm definitely against it when, Moorpark College soccer has to play, Santa Barbara in the first round of the playoffs. I'm like, why do we have conference play if these teams are going to play all these conference games and then just play each other again in the playoffs? I hate it when that happens. But, I understand in football, there's only so many games. There's only so many weeks. Like, it's hard to kind of there's no real great way to do it. So you kind of have to live with it. But, certainly the Rams, now that they're probably an underdog, and they just lost in Seattle a couple weeks ago, I'm sure they're loving the opportunity to kind of rectify that. But it is kind of an interesting thing where we're getting, let's see. There's another divisional matchup too in the playoffs that's escaping me, but these teams,
Cleveland, Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean they just played, so
Yeah.
it's kind of like, it's not great, but they like I said, those teams know each other, inside and out. It's like whoever's going to come up with the innovation to win the game is really, going to earn. Somebody's going to earn those wins simply by coming up with the tweak that that the other side's not going to figure out. But that's those teams spend so much time spending all year kind of studying each other. So there's no secrets for sure.
Joe, we're all out of time. Thank you so much for taking your time out of your night. We really appreciate you coming on. Before we let you leave, though, really quick, who's your Super Bowl winner? And who's your dark horse? Really quick, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I haven't thought of it, so it's off the top of my head. But I think the Chiefs, until they're knocked off, it's a great. I don't know if they're an all-time team, but they're certainly the best team of this era at this moment, and somebody beats them. I told my kid, that they were going to win the Super Bowl again. I wouldn't. I think the Bucks have what it takes to get there, but a Brady, not to go chalk, but.
Ooh, and there goes 30 seconds. We'll finish up this podcast in part 2.